Most men think the warrior archetype is about aggression, dominance, or brute force. That's not strength, that's compensation. A true warrior doesn't fight the world, he commands himself. And most men have never been trained to do that. Hi again, this is Greg Swanson. This is Warrior Mind Podcast 753. And we're going to jump back into the archetypes, this time with the warrior archetype. Previously, a few sessions back, we talked about the king archetype and the power it plays in our lives from a masculinity perspective. And today we're going to be jumping into the warrior. So for many men, the word warrior immediately conjures up images of aggression, relentless drive, and unyielding toughness. They push harder, grind longer, override the body, suppress emotion, win at all costs. This version of strength is familiar to many of us, but it's not mature. So we're going to be jumping into the mature aspect of the warrior archetype. You know, the great misunderstanding, what the warrior is not. So let's go through this so that we can figure out what not to do, so then we can flip it 180 degrees and understand what to do. And again, these archetypes came from Carl Jung. He came up with 12 archetypes, but Robert Moore dove deeper into the masculine archetypes. And the four archetypes, again, that we're going to be visiting is the king, which we have, the warrior, which we're doing now, and then there'll be the magician and the lover. And we're going to see how all those play into forming a mature masculine energy for men today as opposed to what they're doing. So the warrior is not about rage, not about domination, not constant battle, not living in reaction. So note the clear cultural distortion between what it is now and what we're talking about. There is a distinction, right? The culture out there shows warriors, this aggression, fighting, battling, etc. But that's not really the case when it comes to the warrior archetype. So the true function of the warrior's job is precision, right? Kind of like you look at a samurai, they have precision action. They're not going in there like a Viking with just slaying things left and right. So it's direct energy. So the warrior knows the energy, what they want to get accomplished. So they don't use the shotgun approach. They use the laser approach. They're specific, right? It's focused, follow one course until successful. So it's direct applied energy. It's clean action. It's action that is for a purpose, not hoping something will happen. And that can be, at work when you're doing sales, you could do dialing for dollars, which is not clear action, or you could do a little preparation and understand your ideal client and sift out who that may be so you have clean and direct action. It's emotional regulation. Again, getting back to sales, if people say no, 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 you regulate that emotion and going, okay, for every no, I'm getting closer to a yes. And if you're doing working out and stuff, the emotional regulation, you don't start throwing weights all over the place and slamming stuff down. You have this regulation that you keep inside, but use it to move objects, if you will, if it's working out. And then you follow through under pressure. When pressure happens, a lot of us will just stop and move on to something else. But the warrior follows through specifically when they're under pressure. They finish what they start. The warrior is a function. It's not a personality. So this is not like a DISC or a Myers-Briggs. This is a function. This is the action. You could say I'm taking warrior action as opposed to I am a warrior, right? Because I am a warrior is, a personality when we say I am. Or you could say I'm taking warrior action. And this would be direct, clean action, emotional regulation behind it, and follow through under pressure. Discipline without force. So a lot of times we will try to use force to be disciplined, and we force ourselves to be disciplined. We need to be motivated to be disciplined. But the warrior archetype is disciplined without this force. There's no internal battle, there's no internal conflict. Let's just say you want to wake up at 4 to go to the gym. You wake up at 4 and you go, oh my gosh, I don't want to go. Let me do this. Let me count down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, jump out of bed. I could do this instead, right? And so you have this internal war. The warrior archetype is just discipline. You wake up and you go. There's no communication. There's no battle. There's nothing else going on. It's just pure and simple, right? There's no self-violence, meaning beating yourself up to go or beating yourself up because you didn't do something. It's discipline without this force. So it's just habit forming in a sense, right? Most of you probably brush your teeth every night. You don't have to force yourself to do it. You develop the discipline to do it. You don't have this violence like, oh, I better brush my teeth, otherwise they're going to pull them out. It's just like, no, I brush my teeth. That's where there's no self-violence involved with this. There's no white knuckling, right? I mean, we think of this like, oh, I got to grin and bear it, and I got to go through, no pain, no gain, all this type of stuff. But that's not the way the warrior archetype, right? The warrior energy works. That can be a personality trait that you want to white knuckle it, but there's something unique about that aspect where we do want to push ourselves beyond our comfort zone, but we do it without this forcing to do it. We discipline to embrace the pain, to keep going. This is not the no pain, no gain. It's just understanding when you hit that pain point, that's when the warrior action takes place. You don't white knuckle through it because then you're cutting off that energy. You want to have smooth energy. And so there's this calm intensity. Again, you look at samurais, they had this calm intensity when they went into battle. They didn't white knuckle, they knew what to do. And there's a lot of right with preparation, but we also want to be able to control our emotions. So when we look at something, whether it's asking for a raise, having a conversation, whatever it is, we're calm, cool, collective, but we are intense and grounded. So this philosophy really is separate from what pop psychology is telling us today. If I didn't put the label warrior archetype and I went through all of these, you would go, well, that sounds like a wuss. That sounds like somebody who's not getting anything done. That sounds like somebody with, mental sensitivity or mental weakness. But when you take it and apply it to your actions in your life, this is really a typical warrior archetype persona that we're talking about here. So it's strength without strain is real power, is efficient. So there's effective and efficient. Effective is doing the right things. Efficient is doing those things right. So real power is efficient, meaning doing those things that you need to do, doing them correctly without strain, right? When we strain, it leads to leakage, meaning power leakage, energy leakage, mental leakage. When we're straining and pushing through, we're not directing the energy towards that one focal point that we want. It kind of gets spread a little bit out all over. Over effort equals lack of alignment. When things are aligned, yes, they'll be difficult, but we won't have to strain ourselves to get it done because it's aligned. When things are aligned, they're in a row, and it creates a straight line, and it creates a smooth flow of energy. But if we're efforting, if we're trying to go straight, but our path is going left, and we push, we're out of alignment. So this is where we want to take a look at our values and our virtues and make sure we are aligned with that, so we don't have over effort to try to make things work that really maybe aren't supposed to work. And mastery feels quiet. It's this in the zone, in the flow, right? Like Csikszentmihalyi in Flow talks about, and Steve Kotler talks about. When we get into this point of alignment, it feels quiet. It's cool. It's calm and collective, and things just flow. This mature warrior energy versus adolescent grind culture. right? So those that have been brought up with, no gain, no pain, we have to go through it. Well, it just defeats our energy. We come home exhausted every night. But if we take energy towards an aligned course of action based on virtues, based on our king archetype, giving us direction and boundaries, we will come home feeling good and exhausted. We won't come home feeling burnt out. And so that's the big difference. We're still going to expend energy. We're still going to go beyond our comfort zone. We're still going to push ourselves, but it's all in alignment. So we come home and that was a great day. I got a lot accomplished, as opposed to, man, I busted my ass. I did this and I didn't get anything accomplished. That's out of alignment. So the shadow warrior is kind of this other side of the warrior, right? We can look at mercenaries or it's just somebody who's lazy. But when the warrior loses his center, when the warrior archetype loses its center, and that center can be your values and your virtues, the warrior becomes reactive. Everything pushes its button, right? And again, this is the warrior archetype within us. So we have this energy, but if we're living through the shadow side, everything can be reactive. We're always under go. We never take proactive. We're reactive. We're responding to people's comments. We're responding to text. We're completely reactive. And that reactiveness actually drains us as well. And then we're just rigid. We're almost like a fixed mindset. We're rigid, and rigid things, right? They don't bend, they don't flow, they just stay there. And it takes a lot to stay rigid. And that would be the shadow warriors not being able to flow like water, if you will. And then hyper controlling, meaning trying to control others, right? When we talk about mental strength, one of the first C's is control, and that's control what you can. The shadow warrior tries to control everything around him. It controls the person, the circumstances, everything else. And that can be very, very taxing energetically. The real warrior, the centered warrior, knows what is in his control and controls that ruthlessly. And they're always on guard, the shadow warrior. They're always looking out. Something's going to happen. The other shoe's going to drop. What next, right? It's always doom and gloom. So the shadow warrior is not about shame. It's not being shameful. It's not having these qualities that you're ashamed of. It's just, it's coming from a place of lack of, not integrity, but integration. So let's just take a look real quick at the regular warrior, the centered warrior, and the shadow, right? The centered warrior has calm readiness. The shadow warrior has chronic tension, like the muscles are always tight, the jaw is tight, they have headaches, they are just exhausted all day from doing nothing because they're underneath chronic tension. And then the warrior has directed action. It knows, it's laser focused, it knows what to do, it has blinders on to what it's supposed to be doing. The shadow warrior has scattered force. Let me try this. Let me try this. Oh, there's a shiny object. Let me do this. Let me do that. And that scattered force just dissipates all over and gets nothing done. And then the centered warrior also has internal command. It knows it's self mastery, it's communication. It understands its thoughts, its emotions, its feelings. It understands that and is able to command those. The shadow warrior, on the other hand, is external control, meaning trying to control everything outside themselves before they control themselves. And when you try to control everything out there, you're going to be rigid, you're going to be frustrated, you're going to be scattered because there's so much things out of your control. But when you try to, you're going to come home exhausted every day and not get anything accomplished. Pattern recognition equals insight. So if any of these things registered with you, like, maybe this is true. Maybe you're more in the centered warrior. Maybe you're more in the shadow warrior. But if you can recognize it, either one, that's a great place to start. So now let's talk about the warrior and king relationship, because we did talk about the king a little bit ago. So the warrior serves the king. The king, right, has the vision, has the boundaries, has the rules, has the regulations, knows what to do, and the warrior serves that king archetype. Without the king, the warrior becomes a mercenary, just out there with its energy doing whatever it wants to do, for good or for evil, so the king provides that direction. Without the warrior, the king becomes passive. It just sits back and becomes lazy. But that warrior energy helps the king become active, and the king helps the warrior stay focused. This is about archetype integration. And as we go further with the magician and the lover, you'll see how all of these tie together. But modern application, where the warrior is required today. So this is really important, understanding where we are today and where this application, where this warrior archetype needs to show up, right? It needs to show up by setting boundaries. I mean, how many times have you said yes to everything and then get annoyed and then, go off pissing off because you're so annoyed? But modern applications, the warrior needs to set boundaries in relation with the king. Boundaries are things that are okay to do, things that are not okay. If you have time that you're working and you don't want to be disturbed, you can put up a do not disturb sign. If you don't want people to call you at 9, you don't answer the phone, you hang up, right? You set your boundaries to live within your boundaries to keep your energy going. Healthy discipline, right? This is that health discipline where you take care of yourself physically, nutritionally, hydration wise, and all the other aspects of well-being. You control that. You're disciplined in doing some of those activities every single day, because everything you create comes through the body, right? And so if your body is sick and depleted, what's going to come out is sick and depleted content or words or expressions. And this is where emotional self-command. So again, this is why the warrior is required today, and where, in setting boundaries, in health disciplines, in emotional self-command, meaning instead of being reactive, we are responsive. We know the emotions that are coming up. We know how to control them. We know where they come up, how to neutralize them. And then saying no cleanly. We don't have to say yes to everything, and we don't have to say no like, hey, can you do this for me? No. You can say, hey, can you do this for me? Hey, right now is not a good time. Have you thought about checking with John, Mary, Sally, somebody else to do it? So we can say no without being an a-hole. And then sometimes we just need to be an a-hole and said, no, I told you 5 times I can't do it. No. Implementation can be difficult without the correct assistance. Like trying to get this done may be challenging, but if you have assistance, a coach or somebody else to help you, that's the key. When the warrior archetype is integrated, men often notice that fewer rules are required. They don't have to set up boundaries because they're set up internal commands, the internal boundaries. They know what's acceptable. They know what's not. They know their path every single day. They know what actions they have to take. And they don't have the fewer rules, meaning keeping them in line, because they've already integrated them. Life becomes simpler because action is no longer negotiated at every turn. You know what you're going to do. You take it, you do the action, and there's no wandering around aimlessly chasing shiny objects, right? The warrior moves when it's time to move and rests when it's time to rest. It knows the difference. This archetype knows the difference. There's no drama because it's just they have the focused attention that follow one course until successful. And when that happens, then they rest and they follow that course until successful. There's no need to fight harder because, harder, again, is a sign of lack of alignment. When we are aligned, yes, it's going to be exhaustive, but it's going to be a fun exhaustion. The warrior is trained, not activated. So these are things that you need to do every single day. Some of the things that we've gone over here to make sure you're integrating that warrior archetype. If you want to see, so that concludes the warrior, but there's so much more to it. And when I coach with my clients, we really go into depth about how to embrace this warrior archetype and then integrate it with the king. But if you want to see the show notes on this podcast, you can visit warriormindcoach.com. Over there, you'll find more useful information in the form of other podcasts and blog posts. And while you're over there, you'll find out how to request your power strategy call and maybe perhaps go through these archetypes a little bit more in detail. But since you'll be on the internet, please follow me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest, all under Warrior Mind Coach.